Imagine riding home after weeks on the harsh American frontier, expecting silence, only to find a wounded Apache woman sleeping in your bed. One choice that night didn't just save a life, it changed his forever. This is not a story of guns or glory, but of trust, respect, and a moment that rewrote destiny in the 1800s. West. If you enjoy powerful Western stories that touch the heart and reveal the unseen side of history, subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who loves real frontier tales, and comment your thoughts below. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Now take a deep breath, settle in, and let's start this unforgettable journey. The cowboy returned home as the sun slipped low over the Arizona desert, painting the sky with tired shades of gold and dust. Weeks on the cattle trail had carved silence into his bones, and all he wanted was his familiar cabin and the peace he had earned through hard labor. His horse slowed as they reached the homestead, sensing something unusual. The corral gate stood slightly open, and the chimney breathed a thin line of smoke. The cowboy frowned. He lived alone. No neighbors came uninvited, and outlaws rarely announced themselves with fire and care. His hand rested near his revolver, not from fear, but habit shaped by the 1800s frontier. Inside the cabin, the air felt warmer than expected, carrying the scent of burning wood mixed with crushed herbs. The table was cleared, the kettle recently used. This was not the chaos of a thief, but the order of someone careful. His boots sounded loud on the wooden floor as he moved slowly, listening. The silence pressed back, steady and calm. When he reached the bedroom, he stopped cold. On his bed lay a woman, wrapped in his spare blanket. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, her breathing shallow but steady. She was Apache, unmistakably so, and clearly injured. Yet there was no panic in her presence, only quiet endurance. For a long moment the cowboy stood there, the world narrowing to the rise and fall of her chest. In those days, fear between cultures was common, fed by rumor and bloodshed. Every instinct told him to be cautious. But another instinct, older and deeper, reminded him that the frontier punished cruelty more than kindness. He noticed the wound on her side, roughly cleaned but still angry and red. Whoever she was, she had fought to survive. He slowly set his rifle down and stepped closer, careful not to startle her. The creak of the floor stirred her eyes open, sharp and alert, yet not afraid. She did not reach for a weapon. She simply watched him, measuring his intent the way desert people measured weather. In a low voice, she spoke English, broken but clear enough. She told him she had been caught in a sudden storm, thrown from her horse and injured miles from her people. She had walked until her strength failed and found his cabin unlocked. There was no apology in her tone, only truth. The cowboy nodded, understanding the law of the land. An open door in the desert was an unspoken promise of shelter. He poured water, helping her drink, and saw gratitude pass through her eyes without words. As night settled in, the wind rose, pushing sand against the walls like restless spirits. The cowboy fed the fire and prepared simple food, offering it to her in careful silence. She ate slowly, conserving strength, never wasting a movement. He noticed how she observed everything, the corners of the room, the sounds outside, even him, without suspicion. This was not weakness. It was survival refined into calm. He asked her name and she gave it softly, explaining its meaning rather than its sound. Names, she said, were stories, not labels. The idea lingered with him as the fire cracked and the night deepened. Sleep came lightly for both of them. The cowboy rested in a chair, hat low, boots still on, listening to the desert breathe. More than once, he checked the wound. Changing the cloth with care, he had learned patching up men on the trail. At dawn, pale light spilled through the window, revealing her awake, sitting up despite the pain. She thanked him then, not with dramatic words, but with a steady look that carried weight. In the 1800s West, trust was rare and valuable. He felt it settle between them, fragile but real. Outside, the land stretched wide, indifferent to borders and names. Over the next days, the cabin became a place of quiet recovery. The cowboy postponed his plans, choosing to stay rather than ride to town. He brought fresh water, brewed simple remedies, and listened as she spoke of the desert in ways he had never considered. She did not speak of conflict or hatred, only of balance and respect. She explained how the land gave warnings before it took life, if one knew how to listen. He realized how often he had ridden hard without listening at all. Each conversation was brief but meaningful, shaped by pauses more than words. He noticed changes in himself as she healed. His usual restlessness softened. Chores felt different, slower, more deliberate. She watched him work, sometimes offering quiet suggestions that made the labor easier. When he asked how she knew such things, she smiled faintly and said the land taught those who paid attention. In her presence, the cabin no longer felt like a shelter against loneliness, but a shared space shaped by mutual respect. He found himself waiting for her thoughts, valuing her silence as much as her speech. This was unfamiliar territory, more challenging than any cattle drive. One afternoon, she stood outside for the first time, steadying herself against the porch post. The desert wind tugged at her hair, and she closed her eyes, breathing deeply as if greeting an old friend. The cowboy watched from a distance, struck by the contrast between her strength and the harshness of the land. She belonged to it in a way he never had, despite years of riding across it. That realization had claimed ownership through fences and deeds, but she carried connection without paper or claim. The difference stayed with him long after she returned inside to rest. When she spoke of her people, it was without bitterness. She said they would search for her, following signs the land left behind. The cowboy asked if she feared his kind, and she answered honestly, fear came from actions, not faces. It was a simple truth, but it landed hard. He thought of stories told in saloons, of lines drawn too easily between us and them. In that small cabin, those lines felt thin and unnecessary. He understood then that survival in the West depended not only on strength, but on the courage to see others as human first. As her strength returned, the reality of parting grew closer. The cowboy felt it in the way time pressed forward, indifferent to what he wished. He did not speak of it, and neither did she. They both understood the rhythm of the land. Arrivals were often brief, departures inevitable. Still, he found himself repairing small things around the cabin, as if order could delay change. She noticed and said nothing, but her eyes followed his movements with quiet awareness. The bond between them was not loud or dramatic. It was built from shared survival and earned respect. On the final morning, distant figures appeared on the horizon, moving with purpose. Her people had come. The cowboy stood beside her as they approached, not as an owner or protector, but as a witness. She thanked him once more, this time with a gesture from her culture, offered freely. There were no promises, no dramatic confessions, only a shared understanding that both lives had shifted. As she left with her people, the cabin felt empty again, but not hollow. The cowboy watched until the desert swallowed them, knowing that what had entered his home had changed him forever. The days after her departure felt strangely heavier than the weeks he had spent alone on the open range. The cabin stood just as it always had, yet everything in it felt touched by memory. The cowboy moved through his routine with care, repairing fences, tending the horses, and riding the boundary lines. But his thoughts kept returning to the quiet strength of the Apache woman and the calm certainty she carried. He found himself noticing details he once ignored, the way the wind shifted before dusk, the subtle change in the birds' calls, the patterns left by animals near the creek. Her lessons, spoken and unspoken, had settled deep inside him. One evening, as a storm rolled in from the west, he spotted riders in the distance. His hand moved toward his hat, not his weapon. When the group approached, he recognized the Apache markings and stood still, letting them see he meant no harm. An elder stepped forward, speaking slowly in careful English, thanking him for offering shelter. The cowboy replied simply, saying the land had made the decision for him. The elder studied him for a long moment, then nodded, as if confirming something he already knew, not as a prisoner or a guest of suspicion, but as a man who had shown respect. The journey was quiet, the rhythm of hooves steady against the earth. Along the way, he saw the desert through their eyes, hidden water sources, ancient paths, and places where the land seemed to breathe. There was no boasting, no attempt to impress. Knowledge was shared only as needed, reinforcing the idea that wisdom was not owned but earned. The cowboy felt humbled, realizing how little he truly knew, despite years on the frontier. When they reached the Apache camp, he stayed only briefly. The woman stepped forward, stronger now, her posture steady and confident. Their eyes met, and in that moment words felt unnecessary. She thanked him again. But this time she added something more, that his kindness had crossed a boundary, deeper than distance or culture. The elder explained that respect shown in hardship created a bond that did not fade easily. The cowboy accepted the words quietly, understanding that some connections were meant to guide a man rather than follow him. Returning to his ranch, life took on a new rhythm. He no longer rushed his days or measured success only by cattle and land. He listened more, watched more, and spoke less. Neighbors noticed the change. He helped without being asked, shared water during dry weeks, and opened his door to travelers caught in storms. His reputation shifted from a solitary rider to a man known for fairness and calm judgment. Without realizing it, he had become a bridge between worlds that often misunderstood each other. Months later, word spread of rising tensions near the trading routes. Fear traveled faster than truth, as it often did in the 1800s. West, when a misunderstanding threatened to turn violent. The cowboy rode out not as a lawman, but as someone who had earned trust on both sides. He spoke plainly, reminding everyone that fear grew when people stopped listening. His words carried weight because they were backed by action, not bravado. The conflict eased and lives were spared. In that moment, he understood the true power of the lesson she had given him. As seasons changed, he received an invitation carried by a young Apache messenger. It was a simple request to attend a gathering meant to honor peace and shared ground. The cowboy accepted without hesitation. At the gathering, he saw the woman again, now standing among her people with quiet authority. Their meeting was respectful, warm, and grounded in mutual understanding. There was no talk of what might have been, only appreciation for what was. They shared a brief conversation about the land, the coming winter, and the importance of balance. In time, the cowboy chose to move his ranch closer to the trading path, turning it into a place of exchange rather than isolation. Travelers, settlers, and native people alike found fair trade and honest treatment there. He taught younger riders what he had learned, not just how to survive the land, but how to honor it. The Apache woman remained a presence in his life, sometimes seen, sometimes felt, always respected. Their paths crossed now and then, each meeting reinforcing the quiet bond they shared. Years later, as he sat on his porch watching the sun sink into the desert, the cowboy reflected on the night he had found a stranger in his bed. What had seemed like an intrusion had become a turning point. His life had not changed through violence or conquest, but through compassion and understanding. In the harsh world of the American frontier, that lesson proved stronger than any weapon. The land remained wild, the future uncertain, but he faced it with a wider heart. And that, he knew, was the true legacy of the woman who had entered his life and left it forever changed.